Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. All the characters in this story are over 18 years old. I walked out of the courthouse again as a free man. My heart was heavy, but my anger was subsiding. To my surprise, I didn't screw up too much this time. I headed for the public parking lot and my trusty old F-150. It was 60 kilometers to my house, and I really needed to get ready for the road. My kids are coming home from school soon, and I needed to be there for them. I had a neighbor who looked after them when I was busy, but now that their mother was gone, I felt I had to spend as much time with them as possible. I went to the door of the bar next to the police station and for some reason entered. The noise level dropped by a few decibels as the customers turned to look at me. I knew I didn't belong here. Every person I could see inside was wearing a law enforcement uniform or badge somewhere. Of course, everyone was armed. I stood for a while to let my eyes adjust to the darkness after the bright August afternoon sun. I almost sighed out loud when I felt the icy air surrounding me. The thermometer on the corner showed 42 degrees in the square in front of the courthouse. There was not a breath of wind. My shirt was soaked with sweat, but only part of it had risen as I walked out of the courtroom. It was too hot in the courtroom, and I was sweating with excitement too. I was sure that my body odor was too noticeable. I walked up to the bar through smoke so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Even these days, when people take care of their health, customers smoked like chimneys. For them, it was mainly a stress reliever, and they didn't seem to care that it reduced their ability to pursue criminals. I looked around the room once more and took an unoccupied place in the bar. The barmaid looked at me for a moment, then came over to me. She stood looking at me, one eyebrow raised, and didn't say a word. By her silence, she made it clear that I was not welcome here. I leaned on the counter and said, "Dos Equis. Don't need a glass." I watched as the barmaid turned and sauntered over to the refrigerators in the center of the bar. She rummaged around a bit and pulled out a bottle from the back shelf. She opened the lid and came back to me. The bottle clinked loudly as she placed it on the counter in front of me. "That'll be $4.75. I took a long sip from the bottle and carefully put it back down. Damn it. It was the coldest beer I've tasted in a week. Of course, Leo's claim to fame was the promise of the coldest beer in the area. They kept the temperature in the refrigerator at 1 degree. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I found a 5 and threw it on the counter in front of the barmaid. Again, nothing was said as she picked up the bill and headed for the cash register. When she left, almost waddling, her buttocks bounced in her pants like two raccoons in a jute bag. Cora has been working at Leo's bar since I found out about this place. When her husband Leo died, she became the owner and the only full-time employee. Without saying a word, my 25 cents in change plopped down on the counter in front of me. She turned around again and waddled away. By this time, I had already drunk almost 2/3 of my Dos Equis. The barmaid studiously ignored me. I wondered if they would give me another beer if I asked. I watched the other patrons in the rearview mirror of the bar as they resumed their interrupted conversations. The noise level has increased again. I had maybe 1 or 2 more sips of beer left when the group at one of the tables decided to leave. 2 customers stared at me as they passed by on their way to the door. The third employee, a plainclothes officer, stopped next to me. "It's been a long time, Dean. Why did you come back?" he asked. I looked at the big bastard and wondered if I could beat him again. After all these years, I still wanted to try. I was in better shape than I was a few years ago, and he looked a lot softer. I thought I could beat him, but I didn't really want to try. Last time didn't end well for any of us. I let myself relax, and the tension left my body. Sean must be stupid. I just got out of court and decided to have a drink before heading home. Is there no law prohibiting this? I just got my 3rd hit and got rid of another traitor. I needed a drink before I went home. I laughed, then continued, "But you probably know all about it. I'm sure you or someone you know has tried her cheating ass too." Sean grinned at me and said, "No, I suppose by law you can drink wherever you have the guts, but you make a lot of people nervous. Why don't you find another place to drink, where you will not interfere with other customers, and you will be more welcome? Damn it, none of us want to see a loser like you here. We look bad when we are seen with a loser who cannot satisfy his women and keep them from cheating on him." I laughed and said, "Oh, I'll do that. Damn it. I'll do it. I know it's better not to drink here with my old friends. What are some of them afraid of, that I will still hunt them? Or did one of them use Paula too? If I told them I didn't give a shit. I learned my lesson when you used Terry. Are you still with that cheater? Sean tensed and leaned toward me. I knew that he was still married to my ex, and I also knew that everything was not going smoothly in their family. They both had affairs, broke up several times, and got back together. I was surprised that their marriage lasted 7 years. I was married to this cheater for only 18 months before she cheated on me, and I kicked her to the curb. I wondered why Sean didn't do the same. I think some guys just don't give a damn about things like that. When I found out that Sean was using my first wife, I took matters into my own hands. For several nights when I was on duty, I drove out of the patrol area, until finally I saw what I expected. Sean's car was parked on the street near my house. I pulled into the driveway and entered my house. Sean and Terry were lying in bed, cooing and cuddling after a lovemaking session. All that saved me from jail that time were the video cameras that I hid to cover the bedroom and living room in the house. I slammed the door when I entered the bedroom, and it bounced off the door's stop. This prompted the sleepy lovers to act crazily. I entered the bedroom and stood at the foot of the bed, staring at my former friend and, soon, my ex-wife. Terry screamed at the noise and saw that I was looking at her. She pressed her back against the headboard and pulled the sheet up to her chin. I could see the fear on her face. Sean jumped off the bed and came towards me. I've known him long enough to know which buttons to press verbally. As soon as he got up, I started verbally attacking him. I told him to get his ass out of my house. I also told him that I was going to go to his house and tell his wife what I had caught him doing. I had a cell phone in my hand, and I took pictures when we were facing each other, in case the video camera wasn't working for some reason. Cursing, Sean bumped into me and knocked the cell phone out of my hands. He pulled his hand back to hit me again when I lunged at him. I kicked him in the balls, then kneed him in the face as he leaned forward. I pressed his head against my knee as she stood up. He fell to the floor unconscious. As I passed him, I kicked him again for good measure. I'll let you guess where I kicked him. I told Terry not to be home until I was off duty. I took my phone and left the room, out of the house and back to my patrol car. The cameras I installed at home connected to a computer in my locked office, so I wasn't too worried about the video I was hoping to get from this little date. I went straight to Sean's house. It was almost 3 o'clock in the morning when I rang the doorbell of the Michaels residence. Sean's wife appeared on the doorstep, looking very sleepy. When she saw me standing in the doorway in my uniform, she screamed and said, "Oh, no, please, not Sean." "Yes, Sean, but not in the way you're afraid of, Mrs. Michaels. I just got back from my house where I found him in bed with his wife. I have photos if you need them." "No, this can't be happening. He's supposed to be at the station tonight. He's a sergeant of the guard." "No, I'm afraid you've been misled, Mrs. Michaels. He wasn't on duty today. Jackson is the sergeant of the guard. Now, do you want me to send you photos? If you give me your email address, and I will send them to you in a day or two." "No, I don't believe you. Sean wouldn't do that to me." "Yes, he would have done that. Here, look." I showed her some photos from my phone, and she collapsed on the floor in tears. I felt sorry for her, but it was good that I caused even more pain to good old Sean. I turned away from the crying woman, smiled to myself, and walked back to my patrol car to resume patrolling. About 30 minutes after I left the Michaels house, I was called back to the station. I was suspended from duty and suspended without pay for leaving the patrol area and assaulting an officer in the line of duty. You see, Michaels and Terry told the lieutenant that she turned to him for help because she thought an uninvited guest had entered our house. I was supposedly returning home to have a little cuddle when I saw Sean in the house and went berserk, accusing them of cheating on me, and attacked him. Of course, I used the video I took from my house to defend myself against the charges brought against me for assaulting Sean. These photos saved me from going to jail for assaulting Sean. They also cost him a demotion and suspension from police service for a short time. No, Sean had reason to hate me in his eyes, even though I felt completely justified in what I had done to him. Well, this marriage has gone down the drain, as has my job. I was fired for my transgressions, and dear, sweet Terry cleaned me up. I lost my house and half of our savings. I was ordered to pay her alimony, but fortunately it ended less than a year later when she married Sean after his divorce was final. Sean hated me to the point of white heat. I could see his fists clenching with the desire to hit me. I almost wanted him to do it, but I hoped he wouldn't. I glared at Sean and waited. It was his move. Finally, he grinned at me and said, "Yeah, Terry and I are still married, asshole." "No, thank you. I know it's you who keeps sending us compromising photos. Why don't you get on with your life and leave us alone?" He laughed and continued, "Or not. Damn it, maybe you're doing me a favor. She's heard so many times that I'm a cheating bastard, and she's seen so many photos that you've sent, that now I could cheat on her and she wouldn't believe it. You've created some problems, but I have to admit that you've helped me too." I almost told him that I wasn't the main person who took the pictures and sent them to him and Terry. One evening I was taking some pictures of Sean, and another officer saw me. He and some of his fellow officers liked what I did, and they started doing it too. There were many officers who hated Sean to the core for one thing or another. Some of them hated him for the same reason I did. They made his and Terry's lives pretty miserable. I also didn't tell him that I only sent one set of photos. I don't follow him or her, and I never have. In the only photo I sent, I just happened to see him with another woman in a bar shortly after my divorce from Terry. I really didn't care one way or the other. Sean turned and walked briskly to the door. I squinted when sunlight burst through the door as he was leaving. One of my last remaining friends in law enforcement came in as Sean was leaving. When she saw me sitting at the bar, she smiled and came towards me. Jackie and I went to the police academy together. She joined the sheriff's department when I joined the city police. She slid across the floor and sat on the stool next to me. Our taciturn barmaid looked at Jackie and raised her eyebrows. "As usual?" "What is it?" she asked. Jackie nodded her head and pointed at my Dos Equis bottle, then held up 2 fingers. A few moments later, a bottle of beer was placed in front of each of us. Jackie handed a tenner to our hostess and waved her away. We each took a few sips of beer. Then Jackie looked at me in the bar mirror. "I was at the courthouse earlier. I saw you at the family court. I've heard about Paula." "Damn it, Dean. You sure can't pick them, can you? What is it now, 3?" I sighed and nodded my head affirmatively, and then said, "Yes, you know that's true. Sean was successful with Terry. Damn it, it only took about a year and a half. Then there was the baby's mother, Susie. At least she lasted almost 5 years before I caught her with the damn football coach at her school. Although Patty was a real surprise. Hell, we'd only been married 9 months when I started to suspect she was walking away from me. I think I should have known this was going to happen. Damn it, I was an officer and I knew how." I looked at Jackie and saw her face tighten. I hurriedly continued, "I'm sorry, Jackie. I shouldn't have said that. Hell, I didn't mean that all the women in the police force were like that. I just think I'm bitter. She was a damn dispatcher, for God's sake." "Oh shit, I don't know what I mean. Shit." Jackie smiled and put her dainty little hand on my forearm. "I know, Dean. Damn, it's almost a risky job. There is so much tension and testosterone in the air that we all succumb to temptation. Some of us just don't have the willpower to ignore temptation and go home to be free." "Yes, whatever you say. I noticed that you and Ed didn't succumb to temptation after all. If you guys and some others can do it, why couldn't Patty or Sean, for that matter? Damn it. You know that from your police work, Dean. Some people are just weak. Some are serial womanizers, like Sean. Now cheer up, drink your beer and go home to your kids." She shook her head and said, "I'll never be able to figure that out. I still can't believe that Susie just went to work abroad and left these dear children with you. How the hell can a mother, how can any parent just leave their children like that?" "I don't know, Jackie, but I'm damn glad she did it. I really thought that when the court refused to allow her to take them out of the country, she would stay here or try to take them anyway. I like having them at home with me. Little Howard graduated from kindergarten this year, and Stacy went to the 1st grade. Everything is still new and exciting for them, and they have such an interest in life. I couldn't stand it if she stayed here and took over primary custody of them. Sometimes you have to work hard and provide proper care for them, but I wouldn't do it any other way, either out of love or for money." Jackie and I finished our beer at the same time. We sat for a while, just enjoying each other's company. Finally, Jackie stood up with a sigh, preparing to leave, and said, "I think I should go. I still have to cook dinner for Ed, do some laundry, and then go to bed to be fresh as a daisy for the morning shift. I got up and followed her out of the dim bar into the blinding light and heat of another August day in southwest Missouri. We both parked in the same parking lot, so we visited each other as we walked to our cars. On the way home, I thought about my latest love failure. At least this time, I was smart enough to sign a prenup with Patty. Each of us parted with what we had brought into this marriage and divided the small amount that we had accumulated over the little more than a year that it lasted. I ran the family farm when my second marriage broke up, but I didn't own it yet. Because of this, I was only required to split the bank accounts with Susie. She was very angry about it. For some reason, she thought my mother had given the farm to me when Dad died. In fact, all she did was hand over the controls to me. I suppose because Mom called it my farm, Susie thought it meant I owned the land, the equipment, and the animals. Now I wondered if that was why she married me. Mom died shortly after Susie and I divorced, and that's when I became the owner of the farm. It wasn't a very big farm, only about 2 plots, but I made a good living on it. To tell the truth, I made more profit on the farm than I would have made as a patrolman if I hadn't lost my job. To top it all off, I enjoyed the work and freedom on the farm much more. Sometimes, if I didn't want to work, I could just say fuck it and fool around. Life was hard, but I loved being on the farm. I returned home about 45 minutes after I left Joplin. My 2 children and their babysitter were in the backyard. The children were playing in their small pool while Tammy sat at the picnic table, reading and watching them. Stacy jumped out of the pool and ran towards me when she saw me. Howard followed her slowly. I hugged both children and went to the kitchen for another beer. I went out and sat down at the table across from Tammy. "Hi, Dean. Is it over now?" "Yes, I'm already out of the game, Tam. I just had a 3rd strike at the end of the 9th inning." I was sitting and looking at the brown dry grass in the yard. I could barely make out the small stream separating my yard from the south field, through the trees growing along the bank of the stream. I let my mind wander to a more pressing issue than the breakdown of my 3rd marriage. I had to start feeding my cattle with hay almost 3 weeks before, and I was worried that I wouldn't have enough for the winter if it didn't rain soon. According to news reports, it was the worst drought in the last 65 years. Cornfields, which usually yielded a harvest of 3 to 5 tons per hectare, had already been harvested for silage, because the grain was so low quality that it was not worth giving it time to ripen for combine harvesters. Other crops fared just as badly due to lack of water. Many farmers have already sold cattle that would not normally be sold because they could not feed them. The situation was expected to get much worse before it got better. I could have survived on crop insurance, but things would have been tight. At least I was able to irrigate some of my pastures by pumping water from the stream that flowed through my farm. I looked at Tammy and saw that she was watching me. I tried to smile, then said, "Well, I think I can look after the kids for the rest of the day, Tam. Why don't you go home? I don't think I'll need you tomorrow, but I'll call you if anything happens." That fall, Stacy was in 2nd grade and Howard was in 1st grade. Shortly after class started, Tammy came to visit me. "Dean, I'm afraid I won't be able to look after the kids much after school this year. Things aren't getting any better with Jack and me. Jack already works part-time at a feed mill, but will lose the farm if I can't find a full-time job in the city to help. I'm sorry that I can't stay with you. I just need more money to get through this damn drought. I'll keep an eye on them until I find a job, or until you find someone else, but you better plan on finding someone very soon. If you still want me to take care of the kids a little bit, and we can fit it into my work schedule, I can still do it." "Shit, Tam. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not sure what I can do, but if you and Jack need anything and I can help, let me know. Of course, I don't want to let you go. The kids love you so much. Do you know anyone who can help?" "No, I won't tell you right away. I'll still be on my guard. Sorry." In early October, Tammy stayed to talk to me one evening after I returned from the field. "Dean, have you found a babysitter yet?" "No. I did find one elderly woman in the city who would agree to look after them part-time, but I can't find anyone who would like to come here and look after the children in our house. Most of them don't want to stay late on nights when I'm still working in the field, or they want a guaranteed full-time job." "Why did you ask? Have you finally found a job?" "Well, sort of. I was hired at Walmart for the Christmas season. They said I might be able to stay full-time after if everything worked out. I have to start next week. Sorry." With the help of Tammy, an elderly woman in the city, and a couple of friends' wives, I managed to take care of my childcare needs during the holidays and through early March. Although I had problems with the selection of assistants, some of them did not want to come to the farm to babysit. Some of them didn't have transportation to pick them up or take them home, so I had to stop what I was doing and go hand the kids over to the babysitter in the afternoon. Then I had to pick them up after I finished work. Sometimes it was really late. Sometimes I had to stop work before I was ready for it, because none of the nannies wanted the children to stay home late at night. In early March, I was working in a workshop repairing some equipment when I heard a car pull up. I walked over to where I could see the driveway and saw the sheriff's car in the driveway. I looked towards the house and saw Jackie walking back to her car. I smiled and shouted, "Hi, Jackie. What brings you here, to the wilderness? Did they finally find the body where I left it?" "It's not funny, Dean. Dean, I have a little problem, and I thought you could help me solve it. Have you found someone to look after your children yet?" "Well, sort of. I have half a dozen people who look after them sometimes. I have to skip a lot of work, taking them everywhere, and sometimes I have to stop work before I'm ready so I can pick them up in the evening. I still haven't found anyone who can keep a constant watch and keep an eye on them here at home." "Why did you ask?" Jackie was embarrassed and said, "Well, that dumb sister of mine is almost as bad at choosing husbands as you are at choosing wives. She caught her husband cheating 2 or 3 weeks ago and kicked him out. She has filed for divorce and needs a job. This is the second husband she caught cheating on. She was a housewife, and you know what the current situation is in the labor market. She thinks she's going to lose her place too. They rented an apartment, you know? Anyway, Jack and I told her that she could stay with us for a while, but she still needed a job. Her jerk doesn't have a very good job anyway, and he's acting like a jerk by sending her any money so far. How about this?" I kind of remembered Jackie's sister. Jackie was a couple of years younger than me at school, and Crystal was a couple of years younger than her. "Jackie, it would be hard for her to drive a car. What is it, about 35 kilometers from your house to mine?" "Yes, but she really needs a start at work." "Well, I don't know. On some days, I wouldn't need it for more than 3 hours or so. Some days I would need it in the morning and later in the evening. Would she want to stay here all day? And if so, did she expect to be paid for the time she spent looking after the children? After paying taxes and paying for gas, she would earn no more than $5 or so on short days. Are you sure she really wants to do this job?" "I don't know, Dean, but she needs something. And on other days, she'll probably have 12 or 14 hours when you're doing the planting or harvesting. So everything will level out, won't it?" "Yes, but sometimes I may not need it." "Tell me, she has children too, doesn't she?" Jackie nodded her head in the affirmative. "Well, who's going to watch?" "Oh, she's bringing her children here with her, isn't she? Or are they already at school? How will she handle it? Damn it. It would have helped her right there if they weren't at school, wouldn't it? They could all eat here as part of the deal, and she wouldn't have to worry about taking care of the children." Jackie said the kids weren't in school yet, and I relaxed. This could really work. I smiled and said, "I'll tell you what. Invite her to visit me, and we'll see what happens." Jackie and I stayed for a few more minutes, and she left. She said she needed to get back on patrol. It must be nice to be a deputy sheriff and just drive around most of the county without worrying about anything. 2 days later, right after I put the kids on the school bus, an old beat-up Mustang pulled up to me. I was afraid that I would have to give whoever was driving a gallon of oil before they could leave. It was burning so badly. I watched as a pretty but exhausted, pale-looking young woman got out of an old battered car. There were 2 small children inside, jumping up and down, trying to look out. I was in the workshop again. I approached the woman, wiping the grease off my hands as I went. She seemed a little familiar to me, and I was almost sure that she was Jackie Crystal's younger sister. I smiled as I walked closer to the woman. She looked hesitant and a little scared when I approached. "You must be Crystal, if I'm not mistaken in my assumptions. Jackie told me you were coming to visit me. I don't think I would have recognized you if I hadn't expected you to come out." Crystal smiled at me uncertainly and nodded her head. "Yes. I hate to bother you like this, Dean, Mr. Thomas, but I'm really desperate. My husband sometimes doesn't send me enough money to buy the kids what they need, and I just can't ask Jackie and her husband to set everything up for us. I already feel like a worthless freeloader. First things first, Crystal. You did it the first time. My name is Dean, And whether you work for me or not, I want you to call me that. Now, why don't you come in and we'll see what we can come up with?" Crystal stared at me for a moment, then turned to the children with a scared expression on her face. She went to the door of her car and said, "Now you two sit quietly and don't touch anything. I need to go talk to Mr. Thomas for a few minutes, and then we'll leave." I stopped walking towards the house and turned to Crystal. "Listen, Missy, I didn't want you to leave your children here in the heat. Bring them too. It's not good to leave children alone in the car. They can't get into anything that my kids haven't gotten into over and over again. You know that." Crystal looked at me, surprised, I thought. I got a faint smile from her, then she turned around and said, "Okay, you two, get out of the car and come with me. Now I don't want you running around and making trouble either. Can you hear me?" I watched as a little boy about 4 years old jumped off the front seat. His mother tried to grab him under the armpits, and she partially succeeded. He looked at her with disgust and said, "I can do it myself, Mom. You help Sissy." While Crystal was helping Sissy out of the child safety seat in the middle of the small back seat, the baby came up to me and said, "Hi, mister. I'm Timmy, and I'm so much." He showed 4 fingers. "I'm going to school next year." "Timmy, I told you to be good. Now don't bother Mr. Thomas." I looked up from where I was squatting in front of Timmy and saw Crystal walking towards me with a little princess perched on her hip. The little girl chewed her finger as she examined me. "Dean, as he already told you, this is Tim, my son, and this little angel is Celeste, my daughter, but I'm afraid most of the time we call her Sissy." "Hi, Sissy," I said. "If your mom doesn't mind, would you and your brother like some juice when we go to the kitchen?" Sissy smiled at me and nodded her head before trying to hide it on her mother's shoulder. When I invited my guests into the house, I asked about drinks and sat us all down at the kitchen table. I put the cookie jar in the center and handed everyone a drink and a napkin. Crystal and I talked about what I needed from the babysitter and how much I could afford to pay. She agreed to $5 a day for looking after my children, with no time limit, if she and the children could eat with us every day. She even agreed to do some of my housework and cook during the days she was here. She also agreed to stay at home most of the day instead of driving back and forth. It would have saved her money on gas, since many school days I only needed her in the mornings and evenings. I showed her the house so she could see where everything was. She agreed to start work the next day. To my surprise, Howard and Stacy immediately became attached to her and her children. They were somewhat unhappy with some of the women who were courting them in the city. I started working more and more hours doing spring planting. About a third of my cultivated land was occupied by winter wheat, and the rest, about 300 hectares, I would divide between corn and soybeans. I had 60 breeding cows and 150 hectares of land on which they could graze or which were set aside for hay for them. I also had some chickens and pigs to complete the work. Spring and autumn were my busiest time of the year. During the first week, to my surprise, Crystal completely cleaned my house. She started in the kitchen and then moved on to the bathrooms and other rooms. On the third day, when she was there, I sat down at the table and said, "Crystal, I'm embarrassed about some of the things you're doing here. I hired you to look after the children, not to be a cleaner in the house. This place looks great, but I don't want you to think that you need to do it too." Crystal looked upset and said, "I thought you said that light cleaning could also be part of my job when I was here." "I'm sorry if I upset you. I was just trying to help, Dean. I'll stop if that's what you want. I just hate sitting here all day reading and watching the kids play." She put her hands to her mouth and her eyes widened. "I'm sorry. I won't charge you for this. I know it would be expensive to pay for all the hours I don't watch the kids and all that. I just feel like I need to do more. You know? No, Crystal, that's not the problem. I just don't want you to get into the habit of driving yourself to death. Relax a little. I appreciate everything you've done and continue to do, but you don't have to drive yourself to death every day." Several times over the next week, I went into the house and found Crystal sitting and watching her children play while she read. Every time I came to the house and she was resting, Crystal looked guilty and got to work. Finally, one day I got myself a beer, went into the room where she was working and said, "Crystal, I need to talk to you for a few minutes. Could you please come into the kitchen with me?" Crystal looked up from dusting and said, "I'm sorry, Dean. I just got some rest." I sighed and walked over to Crystal. I took the duster out of her hands. I led her to the couch and sat her down, and then pulled her to me. I turned to her and said, "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Crystal, have I ever said that I'm not happy with what you're doing here for us?" Crystal bit her lip and shook her head. "Well, Crystal, if I'm not unhappy, and I haven't complained to you about something, and I haven't yelled at you for not doing something, then why do you always jump up when I come in and get back to work? You make me feel like an ogre, like you're afraid of me. I've told you, and I've told you more than once that I don't expect you to work all the time, and I don't want you to do it. But Frank always said that no house can be too clean, and he was upset when he returned from hard work and I was resting." Wow, Crystal again. Do I look like Frank? Do you see how I rest from time to time? Have I ever said or done anything that made you think I cared if you were reading a book or playing with your kids? Damn it, woman. I hired you to look after my kids and told you it's okay to just stay here during the day while you're not working. You were the one who suggested that in addition to doing cooking and light housework for me. I smiled and continued, "I'd take it as a personal favor if you just cool off a little and relax next to me." Okay. Crystal smiled at me uncertainly and nodded her head in the affirmative. "I'll try, but I don't know if I can do it, Dean." Over the next few days, Crystal got better. She started jumping up and getting to work when I came in. Sometimes, if I stayed at home for a long time, she couldn't stand it and came to do something, but she got better. One afternoon, I had just started work after a 10-minute lunch stop when my dam seeder broke down. The wheel bearing froze, and this, of course, prevented the wheel from rotating correctly. I was fucked up. I unhooked the tractor and rushed to the workshop to get my tools. Crystal was in the yard watching her kids play on the swing when I roared into the parking lot. She watched as I jumped off the tractor and headed for the house. I was already on the phone when she followed me to my office. Crystal stood and listened while I explained my problem to the inventory seller. During the conversation, I was leafing through the drill's operating manual. We completed all the preparatory work, and he checked if they had the necessary parts in stock so that I could make repairs. I told him I would come as soon as I could. I hung up the phone and muttered to myself about the damn 2-hour round trip and the time I'd lose on repairs. I felt and heard Crystal coming up behind me. She put her hand on my shoulder. I flinched at her touch and turned to her. It was the first time a woman had touched me in almost 3 months. This surprised me and at the same time strangely reassured me. Crystal said, "Dean, I heard what you said to the inventory seller. I can go to the city and pick up the part for you if that's what you want. This way you can start pulling out the damaged part and maybe get back to work faster." I looked into Crystal's eyes and saw concern in them. I also felt that I was relaxing a bit due to a slight reduction in the load on my time. Damn it, why not? I thought. I can pay her for the ride, and she can use my truck. It would save me at least 2 to 3 hours on repairs. I felt myself smiling and said, "Sure, why not? Thank you, Crystal. That would be a great help. I need you to take my truck because it's a farming business. When you get back, could you take him across the stream to where I work? When you pass through the strip of trees, from there you can see the equipment in the field." Crystal smiled and said, she turned back to the kitchen door and said, "No problem, Dean. Children, come on. We need to go to town for Mr. Thomas. Hurry up. We need to hurry up and buy a part for his seeder so he can get back to work." Much to my surprise, Crystal and the kids moved their baby seats from her old Rattle Mustang to the back seat of my Super Crew car and drove in my lane before I hooked my repair trailer to the tractor. I was returning to the field to begin repairs less than 30 minutes after the breakdown. When I got to the field, I started dismantling the seeder for repairs. I found that the weld was broken, and I welded it again. I'm having some trouble removing the wheel and the old bearing. The wheel got so hot that it partially welded to the shaft. I finished the disassembly just a few minutes later when Crystal came into view. I heard her roaring in the stream and I got worried because I forgot to ask her if she knew how to switch the truck to 4-wheel drive. "How many times have you had to do this because the rocks were slippery and the shore was steep?" When Crystal got to me, she jumped out of the truck and got into it for spare parts. She turned to me and smiled. In one hand, she had a bag from the spare parts store, and in the other, she had a large thermocup per liter with iced tea. I reached for the details, and she shook her head. She said, "You look like you need a drink right now. It won't take you long to have tea, and then you can get back to work." I smiled and took the drink. I drank it in less than a minute, then she handed me a bag of spare parts. I got to work. I was working for a couple of minutes when I felt someone's presence next to me. I looked up and saw little Tim squatting next to me and watching. He didn't say a word. I smiled and went back to my work. This time I felt another shadow and looked up again. Crystal was standing behind Tim with Sissy on her hip and was also watching me. I continued to work. My watchers didn't say a word or move. Finally, after almost 2 more hours, I tightened the last bolt and stood up. Crystal stepped back, and Tim stood watching me. They followed me back and forth while I put the tools in my drawer in the repair trailer. I told Crystal 3 times that she didn't have to stay, but she stayed. She only came home once, and that was to pick up my kids when they got back from school. I looked at my audience and then turned to Crystal. I'm going to walk around the field and see if everything's okay. Could you wait a minute until I get back? She nodded her head, and I continued. If everything's okay, could you take the trailer back to the workshop if I get it started for you? I suppose I can try, but I don't want to break it. I've never driven a trailer before. It's pretty simple, Crystal. Just park the truck in front of the workshop, and I'll put it away when I get back. Just move slowly when you cross the stream, and you'll be fine. That evening I worked until dinner and continued until almost midnight. I finished planting corn and went home. Tomorrow I will start preparing a field for soybeans, which I will sow later. I drove up to the house, and almost all the lights were on in the kitchen and living room. I just drove the tractor into the barn and left it connected to the seeder. I started the truck and parked it next to the tractor. I would have unhooked everything in the morning. I went into the kitchen and saw Crystal standing by the stove. She was standing there in an old t-shirt. From the way she moved, I didn't think there was anything else underneath her either. She looked at me over her shoulder and smiled. Why don't you go wash up? I'll warm up dinner for you when you get back, Dean. Crystal, you shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry I worked so late. I forgot that you have to go back to Jackie's. Everything was going so well that I just kept rushing to finish. Crystal smiled and said, Don't worry about it. I could have come and picked you up if I needed to leave. I called Jackie and told her you were still at work. She looked a little unsure of herself for a moment, then continued. I told her that if you don't mind, I'd just sleep here on the couch tonight, since it's so late. I really hate waking up kids. Well, I really object, Crystal. I was careless, and I don't want you sleeping on my couch tonight. I stopped when I saw Crystal's shocked expression. Oh shit. Crystal, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. I just meant that I'm sorry that I was working so late, and I wanted you to sleep in my guest room instead of on the couch. You have no reason to sleep on the couch when you can use the bed. Oh, I bet you put your kids in there, didn't you? Crystal almost whispered. No, they all wanted to sleep with your two, so I put Tim in Howard's bed and Sissy in Stacy's. This is normal, isn't it? I grinned and took a step towards Crystal, then stopped. Yes, that's fine, Crystal. I'm sorry that I said what I said before. It's okay if you stay here overnight, and the rest of the evenings I'll be disheveled again and work late. I turned around and went to the bathroom to clean myself up. When I returned to the kitchen, I found that Crystal was cooking one of my favorite dishes. She made meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and corn with whole grains. It looked wonderful, but it tasted even better. Of course, a 2-day-old skunk would be just the thing. I didn't eat anything except a sandwich at lunch. The weeks flew by unnoticed. My work was progressing better than at any time in recent years. Crystal has become almost indispensable. She seemed to have almost taken over the running of the house and yard. She even started caring for the chickens and doing some of the work in the pig pen. I lost count of how many times she went to town to get spare parts, seeds, or something else. She helped more than any of my wives, and 2 of them grew up on a farm. I often worked late, and she and the children stayed over at my place. After they started visiting us so often, I suggested that she leave some of their clothes in the house so that they could have them if needed. I declared the 4th of July a day off for the whole family. I was so busy that I decided not to work and invited Crystal and her children, Jackie, and her husband Edward to my house for a hearty dinner and a swim in the stream. After dinner, which consisted of barbecue brisket, fried chicken, and all the side dishes, I watched the happy faces of the women who cleared the table for a while. I tried to help, but I was rudely turned away. The 2 sisters laughed and giggled as they worked. Ed was buried under a bunch of kids. I walked away and sat down by the stream. I watched the slow flow of water through the bathing hole at the edge of the yard. I listened to the laughter of the children as they played with Ed, and the occasional laughter of the women. I could hear random explosions when a neighbor was setting off fireworks. I felt my stomach clench as my thoughts returned to my past life. What I heard on this hot July day was what I had dreamed of during my 3 previous marriages. I had 2 wonderful children and a few friends, but I had no one to share it with. I was still single and getting too old to have high hopes of finding that gold nugget that other men had. Terry, the girl I grew up with, the daredevil from the next farm, gave a shit on me almost from the very beginning. No sooner had we moved to a big city than she got used to the city and started dating her friends, and eventually cheated on me with one of the officers I worked with. Then there was the beautiful, cheerful, kind Susie, a teacher from a local school, whom I met in a city cafe. God, how I loved that woman. She lived in the city, but she liked it here in the country at least until she found out what the farmer's wife had to put up with. Late nights, dust and dirt, greasy clothes, and previous nights in the city on weekends finally got to her. From the very beginning, despite her declared love for children, she resented that she was attached to my work and our children. Susie began to devote more time to her school duties and then volunteered to accompany the cheerleaders on the bus to the away games. Then I found out that she started going to the games herself, and after that she and the head coach stayed in town and had fun for a while before returning home. When I realized that she was cheating on me and threw her to the side of the road, she laughed and said, "Well, at least now I can get back to the good life. I really loved you once, Dean, but no real woman can live that kind of life year after year. I'm so sorry, but I just need something more than sitting on the patio at night, too damn tired to even go to bed." During the divorce, she received primary custody of the children and tried to get a portion of the farm's value. She was royally furious when she found out that the farm and everything on it still belonged to her mother. I was paid a salary for working on the farm. To Susie's horror, she discovered that the amount was slightly less than hers, so she didn't even receive any support. However, I suffered quite a lot because of child support. Less than a year after our divorce, I found out that Susie was planning to take the children to Japan. She and her new lover got a job in the school system of the Ministry of Defense to teach there. I refused to let her take the children out of the country. As a result, we went to court again, but this time I won. She was forbidden to take her children out of the state. To my surprise, she then gave me full custody. When I told her how surprised I was, she said, "What you did to me and the kids is wrong, Dean. The child should be with his mother, but I can't miss this opportunity to see the world because you're a selfish pedant. Now you have children. You can see how hard it is to have a life and a job and take care of them for a while." She smiled at me and hugged the children once more, after which they left with their new jerk. Patty, my third wife, wasn't that much of a surprise when she cheated on me. I should never have married her, but I have to admit that I was lonely and desperate. We got along pretty well, and I ignored her flirting and touching with fellow officers from the sheriff's department. I met her at Jackie's, and we got along well enough to date. We also had a lot in common. I was a police officer for 2 years before I was fired when my first marriage broke up, and she worked as a dispatcher for the sheriff. We knew some of the same people, and she grew up on a big farm in Iowa. I remembered how we used to joke when I worked in law enforcement. I ignored her actions until one day I went to visit her. I found her in the car with another deputy. They had a lunch break and she was eating his hot dog. Damn, another run-in with the law for shooting a service dog in cold blood. At least he didn't press charges, and I didn't have a job that I could lose that time. I continued to sit and stare at my fields, lost in gloom. The damn dust and the bright light made my eyes water again. I hated it. I felt someone's presence nearby and turned my head. Crystal was standing about 3 meters behind me. She saw my face and frowned. She came over and plopped down on the ground next to me to look at my face. "What's wrong, Dean?" She looked at me for a moment and leaned towards me. Before I realized what she was doing, I felt her fingers wiping the tears from my face. "Nothing. I'm just sitting here listening to happy sounds and thinking." "What are you thinking about?" "Oh, it's nothing special. Just getting lost in the memories, I guess. The kids seem so happy, and it's kind of peaceful here. I was just enjoying the day." "That's bullshit. You can't shit in here, Dean." Judging by the expression on your face, those weren't happy tears that I wiped off your cheek. Now tell me what's wrong. I kept telling Crystal that everything was fine until she did something I never expected. She punched me and started crying. Damn it, Dean. I've been working for you for 4 months now. I've been with you almost every day and I know that something is wrong today. I'm pretty sure that's not what Jackie, the kids, or I did, because you usually tell us and you usually don't cry when you do it. And don't try to feed me the old allergy trick or sunlight. You've never had an allergy problem, and you know it, and the wind isn't blowing hard enough to get something in your eye. Finally, I sighed and said, okay, Crystal, I guess I felt sorry for myself. I'm a fucking loser, and it hurts. I was listening to the kids laughing and playing with Ed, and you girls were laughing in the kitchen, and I was all alone here, okay? I've been married 3 times, and each time I chose a cheating fool, and I realized that I would never find or have a good woman to marry, okay? I'm a loser. Crystal looked at me in shock and then slapped me in the face. Before I could do more than raise my hand to touch her burning cheek, she started yelling at me. You're a fucking asshole. You know damn well you're okay. Well, maybe that's the way it is. You're damn gullible, and you don't look at what a woman really is before you marry her. Then you're damn gullible. And oh, I don't mean that. I mean they betray your trust and you think there's something wrong with you? Shit. The only thing wrong with you is that you don't do research before you let your heart pull you into something that you should run away from. That's my problem. What kind of man needs a loser woman with 2 kids? I am a millstone that is just waiting to cling to a man and pull him down. They don't want anything to do with me. No man wants to have a ready-made family that will suck all the income out of him. If I can admit it to myself and be happy, why can't you be happy with what you have? Dean, you have 2 wonderful children, a job that you love, and friends who will do anything for you. Dean, you have everything, and someday you'll find the right woman if you just keep your eyes open. Crystal got up and walked towards the house, then stopped. Oh, she said, I forgot. I came down here to tell you that the kids are ready for cake and ice cream. That's if you can get your head out of your ass and go up to the house. I sat for a while, looking at Crystal as she walked quickly back to the house. Finally, I got up and followed her. When I got to the kitchen, I saw Ed sitting at the table and looking towards the living room with a puzzled expression on his face. Ed turned to me and said, what the hell was going on there? I've never seen Crystal so furious. I think I made her angry. I felt sorry for myself, and we talked. I don't think she liked some of what I said. About that time, Jackie came back into the kitchen and stared at me. She shook her head and said, Dean, sometimes I think you're probably the dumbest person on earth. Then she turned around and started cutting the cake and putting it and the ice cream on plates for everyone. It was quiet while everyone ate their cake and ice cream. After this mess was cleaned up, everyone went outside again, into the cool twilight. We sat by the stream and watched the children swim and splash in the water while the adults talked. Sometimes we could see fireworks in the sky from nearby houses, and in the distance we saw a demonstration from Stillville. Finally, around 10 o'clock in the evening, Ed and Jackie decided that it was time for them to go home. They had to work the next day. Crystal gathered her children, and they all climbed into Ed's SUV to drive back. The kids and I stood and watched until they turned onto the highway, and then went inside to take a bath and go to bed. It was another night when I found it hard to sleep. I kept thinking about my past life and what Crystal had said by the stream. Maybe she was right, but damn it, it couldn't be, could it? Damn it, I know she was wrong. Damn it, I've known Terry most of my life. How could I have foreseen what she would do? Susie was a teacher and went to church every Sunday. Who would have thought that she would turn out to be a traitor? I knew her for a few months before we started dating. We dated for almost a year before we got married. I thought I knew her for sure. Crystal may have been right about Patty. We only knew each other and dated for 9 months before I married her. But damn it, she worked in law enforcement and grew up on a farm. I knew the nature of the job, didn't I? What was I doing wrong? What was Crystal trying to tell me? To my surprise, I was still asleep the next morning when Crystal and her children arrived. I didn't expect her so early because all I was doing that day was making hay. Damn it, I couldn't start until the dew was off the grass, and that was usually around 10 in the morning. God, I certainly flinched when 4 children burst through the bedroom door and hit the edge of the bed. It was already past 7 in the morning. Stacy smiled and said, "Come on, Daddy. Crystal is making breakfast, and she says you have to come now, otherwise it will get cold. She makes your favorite omelets and even makes us baby oatmeal waffles with pecans. Sissy said, "Yes, Mr. Thomas. Come on, it's time for us to eat." She started to pull the blanket off me, and I grabbed the sheet. "No, don't do that, Sissy," I said. When Tim and Howard saw what she was doing, they also grabbed the sheet and pulled. 3 was too many for me, as I didn't hold the material well. The sheet flew off me and fell to the floor next to the bed. I bent down to pick it up when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Crystal came through the door of my room and said, "Hey, what's the delay? I need you to go to the kitchen right now, otherwise the food will get cold." Then she looked up and froze in shock. I was just pulling the blanket over me when I saw her blush. Little Tim only made the situation worse. "Mommy, why is Mr. Thomas naked? You won't let me sleep naked. But why is he?" Crystal's blush deepened, and she turned away from me. "You kids get out of Mr. Thomas's room right now. I'm sure he'll be here soon." When I got to the kitchen, Crystal was having a hard time with Tim. I stood and listened to her explain about my sleeping clothes or lack of them. "Tim, sometimes adults prefer to do things that are not suitable for children. Well, Tim, this is Mr. Thomas's house, so he can sleep like this if he wants to. Are you saying that now I can sleep naked in our house? It's so cool. Hey, sissy, now we can sleep naked in our house." "No, that's not what I meant, Tim. I mean, sometimes adults." I entered the room and sat down in my seat. I looked at Tim and said, "Let me help you with this, Crystal." "Look, Tim, sometimes adults decide to do what?" I saw Crystal staring at me and changed my mind. I continued, "Well, Tim, I think it's kind of a matter of comfort and privacy, but mostly I think it's an adult thing. Adults don't have to worry about being seen naked in the privacy of their rooms, and sometimes it's better for them if they sleep naked. When you get older, I'm sure you'll be able to figure things out. But right now you need to do what your mom says, because she knows when to do something and when not to. You see, in the privacy of your room, sometimes you can do things that you can't do otherwise. So if I'm all alone in my room, I can be naked too?" "No, Tim. You have to do what your mom says, and you see that sometimes an adult has to go check on you so that you're not naked when they can see. But mom sees me naked all the time. Why can she see me naked in the bathtub and when I'm getting dressed, and not when I'm sleeping?" "Well, Tim, because she's supposed to help you do these things, but she doesn't have to help you sleep. You can sleep all alone, and then you need to be dressed in pajamas. So it's okay for an adult to sleep naked, because then no one will see them? Well, sort of like Tim. It's an adult's choice. No one should be naked where others can see them, if they or others may be offended, or if you are in public. You see, I was alone in my bed, and no one could see me. I was properly covered up, so there was no problem, and then you kids came and pulled the blanket off me. That's what was wrong. It was as if you were in the city and someone was trying to undress you. That would be wrong, wouldn't it?" Tim smiled and nodded his head. "Then it's like we stripped you, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry that we did this. But if bedspreads are like clothes, then why can't I go to bed naked and cover myself up?" Crystal was smiling at me, trying her best not to laugh. Finally she said, "All right, Tim, that's enough. You just have to understand that this is Mr. Thomas's bedroom and his house, and he can do whatever he wants in it. He is an adult, and if he wants to sleep naked or in a suit, he is allowed to do so. You can't do this because I'm your mother, and I'm saying I don't want you to do this, okay?" "Okay, Mom, but I would definitely like to sleep naked." After breakfast, I went out to the patio and drank coffee. After Crystal cleaned up, she came out with her cup and sat next to me on the swing. I looked at her. There was a smirk on her face. "Damn it, Crystal. I'm sorry that I caused this. Tim's sure he's only thinking about one thing, isn't he? Well, Dean, you know he's a little man, and I've never met any of you who didn't want to get naked at every opportunity. Thank you for trying to help." Crystal and I had another cup of coffee, then I decided that the day was dry enough to get to work. Things were going well, and I stopped early for a change. I was able to send Crystal and the kids home early. For some reason, Crystal seemed upset when I told her to leave and let me clean up the kitchen. It's finally time for Crystal's final hearing on her divorce. Her husband had been dragging it out for a little over 4 months. I have arranged my job so that I can look after all 4 children. We decided to go into town and buy some supplies while she was in court. I needed filters and other parts for my equipment, so one of the stops was an inventory store. The parts salesman smiled when I walked in and said, "Hi, Dean. It's been a while since we've seen you here. Where is your pretty wife today?" I felt a chill run through me, and I guess it showed on my face. The salesman said, "Oh, it's a touchy subject, isn't it? Sorry. I'm just so used to seeing her shopping for you now. Well, give her my regards when you get home. I don't have a wife anymore. We've been divorced for almost a year now." "What? You're divorced? And she's still running around for spare parts for you? How did you manage to convince her to do this?" Now I was confused. I knew Patty never came to get spare parts for me. I finally got my brain working and said, "Oh, you mean Crystal? That's not my wife. She just helps with the kids and sometimes does my errands. Today she is in the courthouse, trying to divorce her cheating husband. Sorry for the confusion. You're kidding, right? God, how that woman speaks of you. Damn. I wish my woman would speak as well of me as she does of you. So, what are we going to have today?" I'm glad it was my last stop. I couldn't think of anything but what old man Scoggins had said at the spare parts counter. What did Crystal say about me anyway? Crystal and I returned home at about the same time. When she entered the house, she looked very upset. I looked at her and asked, "Well, how did it go today? Is it over?" Crystal's face contorted and she began to cry. She said, "Yes. No." The judge granted the divorce claim, but left alimony open until the children's DNA test was performed. This asshole claims that they are not his children and is trying to avoid paying alimony. How could he think that? He was cheating on that. When did I even have time? Even if I wanted to. Crystal collapsed onto the couch next to me. I didn't even think about it. I hugged her and pulled her to my chest. I was stroking her beautiful hair when all 4 children came into the room. Sissy asked what was wrong and tried to hug her mother. I said, "Kids, your mom is upset because your dad said some bad things to her today. Why don't you go play in your room while I talk to her and bring her to her senses?" Crystal looked at me and tried to smile. She lay there and cried silently for several minutes. I just held her and stroked her gently, soothing her. Her sobbing slowed down and stopped. I looked down and she was breathing softly, slowly. She dozed off against my chest. What the hell am I supposed to do now? I just sat holding Crystal in my arms while she slept. Finally, almost 30 minutes after she fell asleep, Crystal moaned and stirred. I looked down just in time to see her eyes pop open. She gasped and quickly sat up straight. She looked at me in shock and blushed. "No problem, Crystal. You obviously needed a break, and I really didn't mind. I had no choice but to hug my friend and help her feel better." "Really? Well, thanks anyway. I guess I'd better get on with dinner now. It will be too late already." Crystal headed into the kitchen, then turned to me and said, "Dean, would you mind if we stayed the night? I really don't want to go to Jackie's after dinner." "No problem. Crystal, you really don't need to ask if you can stay the night at my place. I like that I have you. Actually, after school starts, I think you should still spend weeknights here so Tim can go to kindergarten here. That way you can keep working and you won't have to arrange for him to stay at Jackie's or pick him up every day and take him to your place. We'll just tell the school that you live here and they'll enroll him as a permanent student." "Dean, are you asking me to move in with you?" Well, not really. I mean, you should just stay here to make it easier for you and the kids. I don't mean that you should sleep with me or anything like that. We can just keep going the way we are now." "Oh, I think we can do it. Are you really not going to mind? I mean, I feel like we're kicking you out now, and if we stay any longer, it's just not right. I think you need to start paying me less to compensate for us staying here with you longer." Over the next 3 weeks, Crystal moved all her belongings and the children's belongings to my house. Jackie helped her once or twice, and I noticed that she was grinning at me. I wonder what all this means. Finally, just before school started, the DNA results revealed that Frank was the father of Crystal's children. The court awarded child support, but they did not award any alimony. It seemed that what I was paying Crystal was close enough to what Frank was earning that no one was sanctioned. Although even child support was a pittance, Crystal received $25 a week for each child. After moving in, Crystal began to do even more housework. She took full care of the house, yard, and chickens. She even worked in the garden during the season. She also did all the light work of caring for the pigs and helped me with the cattle. I began to wonder how I ever managed to handle all this alone. Sometimes I smiled and realized that I was not in time. Now I was coping with some renovation work and was even able to do some cosmetic work on the house and outbuildings. I'll be damned if she didn't spend a lot of her time helping me with that, too. Hell, we even had fun doing it. It was a pleasure to work with her, or just be around her. One of the neighborhood boys went to the car service, and I bought his truck from 10 years ago. I couldn't find anything wrong with it, and I wanted a more reliable second car than the old junker Crystal. When I asked her to come with me to pick him up, she went willingly. I asked her to take him home. After we brought him home, I refused to take the keys when she offered them to me. I said, "No, Crystal. Keep them for yourself, and put the spare set on the key panel. I want you to drive a new truck from now on, or mine when you leave here. I don't want to risk your old junker shitting you somewhere." Damn, just like a woman. Crystal stared at me for a minute, then burst into tears and ran into her bedroom. That fall, we had a big Thanksgiving and Christmas right there at my old farmhouse. I didn't have any relatives living in the area, but Crystal still had a brother and her sister Jackie. All of them and their families came, and we had a great time. The screams and running of all the children made the holiday so special. My God, how these women could cook. I was sick both days from overeating when I ate their delicious cooking. We even had a little New Year's Eve party. After our guests left, Crystal poured each of us a last glass of port and sat with me in the dark living room, watching the lights of the Christmas tree twinkle. Crystal leaned against me and rested her head on my shoulder. I put my arm around her shoulders. We were relaxing and enjoying each other's company when I felt her tremble. I looked down and saw that she was crying softly. "Shoo, what's the matter, honey? What's wrong with me, Dean? Why do you treat me like one of the guys all the time? What have I done that you don't like me?" "I'm not easy, Dean. Did it happen the night of my divorce hearing? I mean, I could understand that you didn't molest me while I was married, but what's wrong with me now? Why don't you want me now?" Shit, I thought. Where did all this come from? Crystal, I thought we were getting along great. You're all right. Damn, I know you saw when I showed my needs, but I'm not going to do this to you. Crystal, I like you more than any woman I know. You're very helpful here, and I just like being with you as much as possible. I know that you will cover for me and help me in any way you can. How should I treat you? Damn, I think you're my best friend in the world. I just wish I'd met you when I was younger, before my life got so messed up. You're a much better woman than the three I was married to. You're all right. I felt my stomach clench and my heart clench from the great feat. Damn, she wasn't going to do that, was she? If so, would I be able to go through it again? Damn, we needed to have a serious conversation. Crystal, if you're going where I think you are, I don't know if this is a good idea at all. I admit that I've thought about you a lot in that way, but I just don't know if I can bring myself to do it again. I'm a loser, and every time. Crystal pulled away from me and glared at me. Damn it, Dean. Are you trying to tell me that you think I'm just as much of a cheater as the three you married and had to divorce? Is that true? I'm divorced, and I'm not good enough for you. Didn't I show you what kind of person I am? Damn it, I've been living with you for almost 2 years now. Our children think that we are a family. Hell, we were married in every way except for the ceremony and sleeping together. Heck, you even put my name on your checking accounts so I could buy you stuff. If you didn't trust me, why did you do it? Don't you love me? This is all? No. I think. I took a deep breath and continued. I think I really love you, but I just couldn't take the pain like that again if we broke up. I just couldn't, and I wouldn't be able to get my kids to go through this either. What about me, Dean? Don't you think I'm afraid of getting hurt again, too? Don't you think I want to protect my children from the pain of separation? How about this? Don't you think our children would be devastated if we broke up now? It would kill me, and I know it would kill you too. All I ask is that I be allowed to show my love for you physically. Damn it, Dean, if you don't marry me, fine. I'm just going to live in sin with you. Damn it, everyone in town thinks I'm doing this right now anyway, so why not? Crystal, I can't think about this anymore tonight. I need to get some sleep. I'm sorry. I got up and left Crystal sitting on the couch and crying quietly. I thought it was a damn good way to ruin the party. I pissed off the best thing that ever happened to me or my kids, and now I'm probably going to lose her. Shit, I couldn't sleep. After I went to bed, I heard the clink of crystal in the kitchen for quite a long time, and then, finally, the lights went out. It was almost 4 in the morning when I finally gave up and got out of bed. I wandered into a dark house. From time to time, I managed to take a nap for a few minutes, but I never managed to fall asleep. The children will get up in 2 or 3 hours, and another day, another year will begin. What will it bring? I had another glass of Glenlivet while I was looking out the back window. I heard a noise behind me and turned around to see Crystal standing and looking at me. She smiled faintly at me and said, "Looks like I screwed up tonight, doesn't it? Do you want me to find another place to stay?" I'm sorry I said such things to you, Dean. I do not know what happened at that moment. I felt empty and scared when Crystal asked if I wanted her to leave. The way she stood there, right behind me, in the moonlight, was so pathetic. I didn't even realize I'd moved. I took her in my arms and pulled her to me. We met in our first kiss, which really had some meaning. Well, not really. We've both kissed each other in the past, but more as friends than anything else. It was a lover's kiss. Crystal moaned and pressed her body against mine. I pulled back and looked into Crystal's face. "No," I whispered. "The last thing I want is for you to leave. I would be so lost without you here. If you had left us, I don't think I would have been able to move on. You would have completely torn my heart out if you had left me. Others just smashed it. You would have taken it with you, and I would have died." What? I had to support her. I picked her up in my arms and carried her to her bedroom. Damn it, she was closer than mine. I didn't even close the door. I put her on the bed and climbed in next to her. We crossed the line together. Crystal screamed so loudly that she would have woken the dead. I was still scared, but now I was afraid that I would screw up and let this wonderful man get away from me. I didn't think about my next step. I pulled away from Crystal almost violently and jumped out of bed. She looked scared. "Dean, what is it? What is it?" she asked, startled. "Wait," I replied, running out of her room. I almost ran down the hall, through the living room to my bedroom. I was rummaging through a vase of jewelry in the top drawer of my dresser when Crystal came up to me. We didn't have time to get dressed after I jumped out of her bed. That's it. Finally. I turned to Crystal. Tears began to flow down her cheeks again. I grabbed her left arm and lifted her up. "I found this crystal. I want you to have it. It belonged to my mother. Will you marry me, Crystal? Please?" "I'm sure." "Crystal, you're all right." It was wrong with me. I was scared and still feeling sorry for myself. "You woke me up. I know it's the right thing to do." Crystal smiled. No, she was beaming. She slightly pulled her left hand towards the ring I was holding and nodded her head affirmatively, whispering the same word. I put my mother's wedding ring on Crystal's finger. We kissed and turned to my bed. After we were in bed, I felt her gently pull the covers over us. Crystal giggled and said, "Well, at least this way I won't have to sleep in the wet." She giggled again and kissed me gently. "Sleep well, honey." Dad, we can't find Crystal. She's not in her room or in the kitchen. Do you know where she is?" I heard a herd of elephants running in panic through the den to my bedroom. Shit. The door was wide open, and Crystal was still lying in my bed. I started to cover her up better when the herd ran into my open door in a panic. All 4 children stopped and stared at Crystal and me. The noise woke her up too, and she was pulling on the blanket. She blushed too. God, she was beautiful. Naturally, Tim would do it again. "Mommy, why are you naked in bed with Mr. Thomas?" he asked. I couldn't help myself. I burst into loud laughter. Crystal glared at me and blushed even more. I shifted until I rested against the headboard of the bed and moved next to Crystal. I patted the edge of the bed and said, "Why don't you kids sit here for a minute? Your mom and I need to talk to you." "Kids, last night your mom finally made me realize that I wasn't myself. I mean, your mom and I decided to get married last night. Now she will only be your mom, and I will be your dad. Is this normal?" Stacy looked at the others and broke into a big smile. She nodded her head in the affirmative, but Tim said, "I thought she was our mom and you were our dad. It won't change anything, will it? But why did Mom sleep here last night and not in her room? And why is she sleeping naked? She doesn't usually sleep naked. She said we weren't supposed to sleep naked." Crystal giggled involuntarily. I looked at her and pulled Timmy into my arms. "Timmy, When a man and a woman love each other the way your mother and I do, they sleep together. That's why you kids shouldn't just walk into our bedroom without knocking and ask if it's okay. You wouldn't want to see your mom naked and upset her, would you? It would really hurt her feelings if you did, and you don't want to do that, do you? Timmy shook his head. Stacy was watching us and smiling. She said, I am glad that Crystal will become our new mother. We all love you both so much. When are you going to get married? Crystal smiled and said, We don't know yet, Stacy. Hopefully soon. But we have a lot to do first. All the younger children climbed even further onto the bed and crawled over Crystal and me. The phone rang and Stacy picked it up. Hello. Yes. I don't know. Guess what, Aunt Jackie? Dad and Crystal are getting married. I heard a scream and tried to take the phone away from Stacy. She pulled back and said, Okay. Yeah. Okay. See you later. She hung up the phone. I said, Stacy, you shouldn't have told Aunt Jackie that. Why, Dad? Was it supposed to be a secret? No, but your mom probably wanted to tell her the news herself. I felt Crystal tremble next to me and turned to look at her when Stacy said, Oh, I'm sorry, Mom. Crystal started crying harder, and I pulled her to me. What's wrong, honey? I asked. She shook her head negatively and said, Nothing. Nothing at all. You called me her mother. She called me Mom. I sent the kids into the living room to watch cartoons, and I wrapped Crystal in my arms. I kissed her gently and stroked her while she cried so hard. I heard the gravel slide and the car door slam. Our back door swung open, and I heard the sound of feet on the floor. I heard voices in the study, then I heard rapid footsteps in the direction of our bedroom. I was watching the door when Jackie burst in her full sheriff's costume. She stopped halfway to the bed and stared at me, hugging her sister. Jackie put her hands on her hips and said, Well, it's about time, idiot. I was sure I was tired of listening to Crystal cry and moan because you ignored her. I was going to shoot you and put her out of her misery. Jackie sat down on the edge of the bed and said, Now tell me all about it and quickly. I have to get back on patrol. How did you manage to get that damn big tip to break the crystal? I looked at Jackie and said, Jackie, could you maybe just come into the office for a minute or two? I need to get dressed and make coffee. It doesn't look like I'll be able to sleep for a while. Jackie got up and walked out the door. I had just got out of bed when she poked her head back in. I'll make coffee, but you hurry up. Jackie, Crystal screamed. I just turned around and ran to the bathroom to get my clothes. We got married on Valentine's Day. We worked and lived the same way as before, except that now Crystal was sleeping with me, and we loved each other physically and in all other ways. In late autumn, Crystal came to me and told me that we were going to have a baby. I promised her one of our own, and considering our age, we decided to do it as soon as possible. The youngest had just started kindergarten, and Crystal started crying. Her child has gone to school, and she feels old. I dragged her up the driveway to the house. Honey, think about it. There are no children here. The work is delayed for a day or two. What are we going to do with ourselves? I asked. Crystal stopped and pulled me to her, moaning, I don't know. I bet I can think of something. She pulled back slightly from my embrace and looked at my face. Her hand went up and cupped my cheek as she whispered, Oh, Dean, I love you so much. Yes, I had 3 strikes in the game of life, but the next time I hit a home run. It took 2 very special ladies to make me wake up and realize that I was looking for fluff instead of essence, and how to distinguish one from the other. End.